Welcome to Buses on the Balcony. This is a portion of our news reports where we will be looking at various bus related topics in the past. Today's topic is diversions around Edinburgh. This is a rather controversial one where a lot of people have various opinions on the number of roadworks, temporary lights and road closures and diversions around Edinburgh that have happened over the years. This seems to be a regular and paints rather a bad picture to the tourists that come to Edinburgh and various other visitors. So, our first diversion is a major incident on South Bridge, and this was a fire. This fire took out a building. Now these buildings, particularly at that particular point on South Bridge, were, and still are, from the Cowgate right the way up to South Bridge. They are sectioned in the middle to allow for two buildings, one on South Bridge and one on the Cowgate. This particular building was taken out by a fire and possibly some damage to the neighbouring building if that wasn't also destroyed. This particular site was demolished and cleared, and the site remained a gap site for some time. This building has now been replaced and a new building there, so you wouldn't even know that there had been a fire there that many years ago. So what were the diversions for this particular incident? Well, there were buses coming down Nicholson Street, went along Chambers Street, then along George IV Bridge, and then down the Royal Mile. At this particular point in time, the Royal Mile was not pedestrianised at that particular section of the Royal Mile. Today it is now pedestrianised and has been for some time and will remain so. So let's have a look at some pictures and photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is a rather controversial one which remained in place for several years, and that is the tram diversions. Now, look, the first half of the route, which was phase 1, also the second half of the tram route was also part of phase 1, but because of over budget, poor management during the first half of the project, this caused a lot of disruption and major delays to the actual project itself. This meant that the diversions that were in place had to be done twice to allow the tram works to be redone because it wasn't done properly the first time round. Now, you may have your own opinions on that, but I think we'll just leave that particular subject there. So, what were the diversions? Well, the diversions for the tram routes were in Edinburgh city centre mostly. They were along George Street to allow for Princes Street to be closed, Melville Street and the West Approach Road for Shamrock Place being closed. Now, the reason for both of these roads to be used as a diversion was to allow traffic to come eastbound along Melville Street and westbound along the West Approach, both rejoining the route at Princes Street or George Street depending on which diversions were in place there, and at the other end they were meeting up at a market. There were various other diversions in place for other parts of the tram project. One was at Murrayfield, and at Broomhouse there was no need for any diversions because at this point there was a busway section had been built many years ago. Buses used guided wheels to allow buses to divert from the main road and move quickly along through Broomhouse and Bankhead. This was given up for the tram project. It was modified to allow trams to run along that section, so that did not need to be diverted, which saved a lot of hassle around that area. It was mainly in town that was where the major disruption was. So the second half of phase 1, which was down towards Leith and New Haven, Leith Walk was closed in one direction. They would do one side and then do the other side. So the diversions for that were down the top half of Leith Walk and along the back of Pilrig for some of the buses that were heading along towards that direction. Most of the buses were diverted along London Road and then down Easter Road for that particular part of the tram diversions. So let's have a look at some photos of the diversions along those particular areas for the tram projects. The next diversion is Ardmillan Terrace. Ardmillan Terrace has been closed several times over the years for various roadworks and road repairs, but the diversion has always been the same. The diversion for that particular road closure is along Gorgie Road, up Robertson Avenue, and then back onto the normal route at Slateford Road. This only affected the 4 and the 44. The latest closure of that road was during COVID. When COVID kicked in and the various restrictions and all that went on there, when all that happened, the road closure stopped the repairs there because of this pandemic, and the diversions remained in place for that. So this saw some rather unusual workings for that particular period of time when COVID kicked in. So let's have a look at some photos of the diversions. Our next diversion that we'll have a look at is Ashley Terrace being closed. Ashley Terrace was closed, and the diversion, Ashley Terrace has been closed several times actually over the years, and the diversion has always been the same. But the latest version of the closure was City Fibre was doing the roadworks there, and they damaged the bridge at the Network Rail Stallone. The damage caused major disruption and extended the length of time that this road was closed due to discussions on who was going to repair that. That eventually got repaired and the roads were back open again. So what were the diversions for this particular road closure? Well, the diversions were along Polwarth Terrace, up Collington Road, down Craiglocker Avenue, along Slateford Road, and back onto the route at Robertson Avenue. This only affected the 38 route. So let's have a wee look at some photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is the A703. Part of the A703 at Hill End was closed, and this saw only the 15 route affected. This caused the 15 to come up Comiston Road. At Fairmile Head Crossroads it went along Frogston Road, and then at Keymes Crossroads it then went down in towards Birdie House and Straighton before rejoining its route at Bush at the Edinburgh University site. So near there it rejoined its route to head out to Pennycook. So let's have a wee look at some photos of this particular diversion. Next diversion is Brighton Place. Now Brighton Place was closed due to cobble upgrades, repairs and replacement. As a result of this, diversions were in place. So what were these diversions then, and what routes were affected? Well, the 21 was affected, and it had a separate diversion from the 42 and the 49. So the 49 and the 42 were diverted at King's Road. They went along Portobello Road, along Northfield Broadway, then along through Mountcastle, and then the 42 rejoined its route there on Dunningston Road to go up to Dunningston Crossroads and back on the normal route there. The 49 then went down Dunningston Road, go up to Dunningston Park, where it rejoined its route there. The 21 had the most disruptive diversion as a result of this road closure, and it's unknown why they had it going along that far. So it went along Milton Road. It came down Dunningston Park along Milton Road, right the way down to Eastfield, along through Portobello that way, right through Portobello, and then rejoined its route at Craig and Tinney at King's Road. So let's have a look at some photos of this particular route diversions. Our next diversion is the 24 and the 38 were diverted at Cameron Toll. Part of Cameron Toll between Esselmont Road and the roundabout, the big roundabout under the railway bridge. That was diverted away from there because of a road closure that was resurfacing works. This was a temporary resurfacing works, and I believe, having spoken to the traffic guy that was guiding the traffic away from that road, I believe it was a temporary trial for a new road surface or something like that. So, what were the diversions for this short time? Starting off at the Royal Infirmary, they went through Mordern, then they went along Gilmerton Road, Liberton Road, and they couldn't go up Esselmont Road because of a tight turn due to a traffic island there. The buses were never meant to go along that way anyway, and it's not part of their normal route. So instead they went straight on to Lygon Road and Granby Road. Now, from Lygon Road to Granby Road, it was a rather tight turn, and the 24 being double-decker and slightly shorter wheelbase barely managed to get through that with all the traffic that was there. There was no traffic management on that particular road to stop cars parking there, so the cars were in the right to go to park there, and the buses were asked to go up that way. So, what did this result in then? Well, the 24 managed to get through there only just, and then the 38 came along, being the slightly longer wheelbase than normal for the Evora, the Volvo B8 RLE Evora. That didn't manage to get round the corner. He got round the corner and then subsequently got stuck. As a result of this, he then had to radio in for some traffic assistance. So the traffic management maintenance guy came. I don't think they were all that far away due to the nature of this particular diversion. They had to be fairly close by to provide assistance, so that's what he did. Came along and he found the bus had got stuck, so he managed to guide the bus back out, which took a fair amount of time to do so and caused a severe delay to the 38 route. As a result of this, it was Lothian's fault for not managing the diversion correctly and putting cones out. So, what did this result in? Well, the maintenance guy, traffic management guy, he then phoned in and just gave them everything that had gone wrong there, and subsequently they no longer went up. They no longer went along Granby Road. Instead, they went along Lygon Road right to the top instead of turning down Granby Road. There wasn't really any need to go down that road because they had already missed the bus stops on Esselmont Road, so there wasn't any reason to go along Esselmont Road anyway. So that's what resulted from that. So, with all this in mind, let's have a look at the disaster that occurred there, along with some of the buses around Cameron Toll on diversions. Our next diversion is the 5. Now the 5 was diverted away from Hunter's Christ and Oxgangs for a road closure. Now I believe the road closure was either closed or it was too narrow for standard buses to get through. Now this resulted in the 5 terminating at Fairmile Head, and a shuttle bus took you from Fairmile Head on a changeover. The shuttle bus was included in the price of the ticket because it was still part of the 5's route, and it took you all the way into Hunter's Tryst. Now they used a single solo on this particular shuttle, and it caused some slight delays to the route. So there aren't very many photos of this particular diversion, but with the few that we have, let's have a look and see what resulted from this in photo form. Our next diversion is Cameron Toll Roundabout. Now Cameron Toll Roundabout between Perffer Mill and Old Dalkeith Road had a major defect underneath the road surface. It was a major sinkhole or something along those lines that could have caused the road to collapse. So they had to get that fixed before that did happen. So, as a result of this, what were the diversions then? So the diversions which caused major disruption to a lot of buses leaving the Royal Infirmary. So leaving the Royal Infirmary, they went through Morden, then down Gilmerton Road, back down to Cameron Toll Roundabout to rejoin their route there, or they would then go up towards Newington, depending on where they were heading as part of their route. It was only the 33 that actually needed to come back down to Cameron Toll Roundabout. Half of Cameron Toll Roundabout was still open because that didn't affect the other side of the roundabout. So let's have a look at some pictures of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is part of Calder Road was closed. Now, what was the diversions for that? They were only in place going eastbound, because only eastbound traffic was affected by part of Calder Road being closed in that direction. So the diversion was via Broomhouse Road, Broomhouse Drive and Saughton Road, and then back onto their normal route at Calder Road past the diversion. So let's have a look at some photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is Spylaw. Buses were diverted through Spylaw up towards Collington. Now, the reason for this was Gillespie Road was closed just past Gillespie Crossroads before the bridge at Collington Village. So buses were able to go through part of Spylaw and then come out just before the bridge where the road closure was in place. So this has seen some rather unusual workings on this. There was some rather unusual workings on the 18 at the time. The 18 was still in existence at that point, and it was still Lothian that were running it, but during the peak times there were some unusual workings which have been captured in these photos. So let's have a look at these photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is Greendykes Road was closed. This was possibly due to the new housing that was being built there. A lot of the old housing had been knocked down and there was new housing being built. So what were the diversions for this? There is a bus only way section that takes you into the Royal Infirmary, but that's for buses only, and there are cameras up there for standard road traffic not to go down there. So traffic was still, the buses were still able to go down there. But what were the diversions then in this case? So the 14 couldn't get to the terminus at Greendykes. There was a new terminus built further up towards the Wisp, so it was terminating at Fort Kinnaird. So the rest of the buses using that particular section of Greendykes Road were diverted along the Wisp, down past the Greendykes terminus, and then along the bus only way section at the small roundabout. It was just at the small roundabout heading into Niddrie. That's where the road closure had been put in place for various works on the new housing. So let's have a look at some rather unusual workings there, heading up and down the Wisp where buses don't normally operate. Let's have a look at some photos of this. The next diversion that we'll have a look at is the 42, which was diverted away from Duddingston Road. Now the reason that this was diverted away from Duddingston Road was that Network Rail were working on the bridge over the Innocent Railway, where Duddingston Station can still be seen, or parts of what's left of it anyway. So what were the diversions for this particular road closure? Well, coming along Perfer Mill, the 42 went through Niddrie instead of down Duddingston Road. Went through Niddrie, down Duddingston Park south, past the Dual, and then back onto Milton Road, along to Duddingston Crossroads, and then back on to its main route there at Duddingston Road. So let's have a look at some photos of this particular diversion. The next diversion is when the one was diverted away from part of Salton Road at Christopherson Village. Now the diversion for this was via Dovecot Road, which made for some rather nice shots as they passed the now preserved Dovecot at Carstorphine. So it was Dovecot Road and Ladywell Avenue, and then rejoined its route back at the other side of Carstorphine village. So let's have a look at some shots of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is the 5 and the 16. The 5 and the 16 were diverted away from Oxgangs Avenue and Greenbank Drive. Both of these roads are on the same road, but they change halfway along. So it's the same road that was closed, just the name changes halfway along. So the diversion for this was Comiston Road and then Oxgangs for the 5, and Greenbank Drive for the 16. The 16 would go along Greenbank Drive and then rejoin the route at Oxgangs. So let's have a look at some photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion we'll have a look at is when the 38 was diverted away from Saughton Hall Drive. Saughton Hall Drive was closed at Carstorphine Road. So the diversion for this was Ballgreen Road, Carstorphine Road, and back onto its normal route at Murrayfield Road. So let's have a look at some photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion that we'll have a look at is the Edinburgh Marathon. The Edinburgh Marathon usually starts in and around Edinburgh and then ends up at East Lothian with major disruption to traffic and various road closures. This usually happens on a Sunday when the traffic is less busy. So what were the diversions for this particular year of the marathon? Well, in this case it only affected the 44 and the 26. The 44 and the 26 went along through Wallingford. Now the 44 normally goes that way anyway, but the 26 doesn't. So the 26 was diverted this way. So both buses, the 44 and the 26, were diverted via Wallingford onto the A1, and the 44 rejoined its route at Milton Road, and the 26 went on to King's Road via Sir Harry Lauder Road and back onto its normal route there. These diversions don't normally last more than a few hours in the morning while the marathon takes place. So let's have a look at a few photos of this particular diversion. The next diversion that we'll have a look at is when New Craig Hall village was closed. This was due to a disused railway bridge that needed to be removed. It was no longer in use for any other purpose, so they decided just to remove the entire bridge. So while that was taking place, the village was closed, so you couldn't get through to Musselburgh that way. So this affected only the 30. So the 30 was diverted from Fort Kinnaird onto the A1 down to the Queen Margaret University and then rejoined its route from there. On the return back east, it had to go down to Monkton Hall. The reason being for that is because at the time there was no slip road to go east from the Queen Margaret University. To this day there is now one a slip road having been built because of new housing that's been built on the opposite side of the Queen Margaret University, on the other side of the A1. So the diversion was along the A1 down to the Queen Margaret University to rejoin the route there, and coming back the way it was Monkton Hall and then back onto the A1 and back down to New Craig Hall from there and along to Fort Kinnaird. So let's have a look at some of the pictures for this diversion. The next diversion we'll have a look at is when part of Milton Road was closed at Milton Link and down past the Julianesque College at Milton Road. Part of this road was closed. So the diversion for this affected the 113 and the 44. The 44 and the 113 went along the A1. They came off the A1 at the Queen Margaret University and rejoined their routes at Musselburgh. So let's have a look at some shots of this particular diversion. The next diversion is the 5 was diverted away from Mountcastle Drive. Mountcastle Drive, part of this road, was closed due to gas works and repairs there. So the 5 came up past Mountcastle, through Mountcastle, and then turned onto Duddingston Road and then went up Duddingston Park and then rejoined its route on Milton Road there. So let's have a look at some images and photos of this particular diversion. Our next diversion is the 31, which was diverted away from Lasswade Road. Part of Lasswade Road was closed due to resurfacing works. The diversion for the 31 on this particular diversion was Lang Lone and then onto the bypass and then rejoined Lasswade Road beyond the road closure, just at the slip road to the bypass. This was one of the first times you would have been able to use a Lothian bus on the bypass for many years, as buses are not normally allowed to use the bypass for passenger services with Lothian. It has since now had the X40 was taken over from E&M Horsburgh, and that now goes along the bypass which it did with Horsburgh. So you can now get a Lothian bus, although it's Lothian country, it's still a Lothian bus, and you can get that along the bypass now. But at the time that this diversion was in place, you couldn't, and no buses actually went along the bypass with Lothian in particular. So let's have a look at the diversions for this particular road closure on the 31.